tonight on Reporting Scotland. Plans for a facility in Glasgow where heroin users can take the drug under supervision are blocked by the Home Office. The number of teachers working in Scotland's schools is up despite continuing recruitment problems in some areas. Opponents condemn the closure of care homes for the elderly and call on the Scottish Government to intervene.
I think that's a scandal because they're so nice. You'd go a long way before you would find anybody else. This was good.
Also in the programme, claims that fewer than 1 in 5 football fans want Hampden to remain as the national stadium. High hopes as Scotland names one of its strongest ever athletics squads for next year's Commonwealth Games. Good evening. Plans for a facility in Glasgow which would allow heroin users to take the drug under supervision have been blocked by the Home Office. The so-called fixed room was planned because of an increase in the number of addicts injecting in the streets and a rise in HIV infections. Well, now the Scottish Government has called for drugs legislation to be devolved to allow the scheme to go ahead. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Rival Alderson.
Drug use on the streets of Glasgow is a public health issue. Within a short distance of the city centre, the paraphernalia of heroin use litters the path used by children on their way to school. Drugs workers have been pressing for a facility where users can take drugs in safety, but it appears the proposal's now been blocked by the UK government.
We've got such a massive problem in Scotland and obviously particularly in Glasgow in terms of such a high rate of fatal overdose deaths. And in Glasgow that's combined with an active outbreak of HIV infection among injectors. So it's incredibly disappointing to all of us who have pushed so hard for this initiative.
Drug consumption facilities or fixed rooms already exist in Denmark. Medical staff are on hand in case of emergencies and offer advice to help users become drug-free. With at least 500 street drug users in Glasgow, a similar facility was planned, but users and centre staff could be prosecuted under laws reserved to Westminster. The Home Office says it won't change them. It said it's for police to enforce the law, and as with other offences of this type, it would expect them to do so. This means the Lord Advocate in Scotland has no flexibility to waive prosecution. Those behind the proposal don't accept it's dead in the water, but they're now waiting for politicians at Holyrood and Westminster to sort out the problem.
The mechanism by which we achieve the legal framework that allows us to implement safer drug consumption facilities is not for us at this moment to dictate. We're here to provide information and advice to Scottish politicians and to the UK Home Office as well. But the key for us is really to try and achieve a solution as soon as possible.
The Scottish Government now says these powers should be devolved, and it's seeking discussions with the Home Office.
The law means that we can't have that ability to act. That's why we really do need to work constructively where we can with the UK Government. But failing that, I think if we had the powers here, we'd be able to take this imaginative approach forward and help support this very vulnerable cohort of people in Glasgow that are facing real challenges and risk to their lives.
Health officials insist plans are still on the table, but they can't go ahead until there's a guarantee those using it won't be prosecuted. Rival Alderson reporting, Scotland, Glasgow.
Families demonstrating against the closure of care homes run by one of Scotland's biggest providers say it's a scandal. Elderly, vulnerable residents are being forced to move. Edinburgh-based Beeld has said 12 of its homes are at risk because of financial pressures. Relatives handed a petition into Parliament today asking the Scottish Government to intervene. Lisa Summers reports.
Paddy again.
In Chrissy Wilson's Bonnybridge care home, 4 generations in one room. It took her family 6 years to find this home, but next year it will close because it isn't financially viable.
I think that's a scandal because they're so nice. You'd go a long way before you would find anybody else. This was good. I've nowhere else to go. My house is sold. My family's here, so what more do I want? I've had a good life.
The company had some good news today. Buyers have been found for 4 Beeld homes. But for many others, the stress and uncertainty continues. Families gathered outside Parliament today to hand a petition into the government, amongst them Chrissy's granddaughter Laura.
We've got 167 vulnerable older people that are about to be evicted from their homes. It's a national disgrace that the Scottish Government are ignoring the issue and not stepping in to help.
Beald's chief executive gave evidence to the Health Committee. He was candid about why they're pulling out after 30 years.
People that were being admitted to those care homes at that time would be able to live independent lives. That's not the case now in terms of people who are coming in. They have far more complex needs. We no longer feel that that's the market that we should be in.
Beald is not in financial difficulties, but the high-cost end of elderly care makes it difficult to make a profit. The government says it's working with the company.
Those discussions are obviously at a sensitive stage, and I get regular updates on how those discussions are going, and I would be hopeful that for many residents they will be able to remain in the home that they are, and for those who can't, we need to make sure that there's a smooth transition, that the minimum disruption and the continuity and quality of care continues.
Looking gorgeous.
Meanwhile, as they prepare for Christmas, Chrissy's family can only hope for better news in the new year. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland, Bonnybridge.
The number of teachers at work in Scotland has gone up, despite continuing recruitment problems in some areas. According to new statistics, there are 500 more teachers than last year. But critics say the total number is still lower than it was when the SNP came to power. Here's our education correspondent, Jamie McIver.
For the government, it must have seemed like Christmas had come early. Official statistics highlighted several year-on-year improvements in schools. Some, they argue, the direct result of a flagship policy.
Your letters to Santa.
The extra cash given to head teachers to help them tackle the effects of poverty. The Education Secretary was keen to hear how this school was spending its cash.
Primary 1 pupils have all been benefiting from working with our colleagues in speech and language therapy, and that is so that we can identify the gap as early as possible when they come into primary 1 and make sure that throughout the children's education that we are working hard to tackle the attainment gap.
Today's figures say most youngsters are reaching the academic standards expected of them. Average class sizes are the same as last year, even though there are more children, and more school buildings are in a good or satisfactory condition. The key figure in this document is about the number of teachers. It's up 543 on last year, mostly because of the money being given by Holyrood straight to head teachers.
The data demonstrates that we are going through a period of strengthening Scottish education. There is very clear and tangible evidence of the fruits of that focus on closing the poverty-related attainment gap, and that will remain the central focus of the government's education policy.
But opponents say teacher numbers are still well down on 10 years ago.
Scottish schools still have 3,500 fewer teachers than they did when the SNP came to power. So although there's been some progress in teacher numbers, almost all of that is down to attainment funding which was supposed to be additional.
Every school in the land would be telling you that they want more teachers, but particularly in areas where subjects are finding it very difficult to have a permanent teacher, and also in some cases where vacancies haven't been fulfilled at all.
The government says today's figures show things are now going the right way in schools. Its critics are unconvinced. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
Further talks have been held in London between the UK and Scottish governments to try and find a way forward on Brexit. Well, after the discussions, both sides said some progress had been made, but they had differing interpretations of what had been achieved. Well, our Westminster correspondent David Porter joins us. David, it seems the two governments can't agree on what they disagree on.
Yeah, Jackie, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Sometimes after these talks have taken place, you wonder the differing accounts they give, whether they've actually been sitting in the same room. Now, we know that happened today because we've got pictures of them sitting in the Cabinet Office at 70 Whitehall with David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, and Damien Green, who was chairing the meeting from the UK government. Speaking afterwards, the Scottish Brexit Minister, Mike Russell, said that in his view, time was running out to get a deal, and he believed that the UK government had to go far further. He said at the moment he couldn't recommend that the Scottish Parliament approve the UK government's Brexit legislation. Speak to David Mundell afterwards and he was far more positive. He said he believed it was a constructive meeting in which they were making progress and he believed that a deal could be forged. But it's pretty obvious, and partly this may be for very public consumption, that as far as these talks are going, the two sides are coming at it from very different ends.
It's been difficult because the differences that were announced last Friday in terms of Ireland and Northern Ireland have complicated the issue of frameworks very greatly. If we are to agree any frameworks at all, they have to be on the basis of equality. They have to be on the basis of all of us doing them together. Nobody has a veto on them. And there's so much confusion out of the situation with Northern Ireland that we need absolute clarity now.
I think it's always been the case that Mike Russell's been a glass half empty guy. I'm a glass half full guy. We've made so much progress in the last few weeks at the behest of both governments. I'm sure that we can complete the task because that's what people in Scotland want.
Now, this is an incremental process and they will meet again next month, but no one is minimising the differences that they are. I think there is a feeling that if there is going to be a deal, it is going to come later rather than sooner, and it may not come until spring at the earliest.
Thank you very much, David Porter in Westminster. Campaigners want a change in regulations which prevent people who are HIV positive from becoming commercial airline pilots in the UK. The call follows the case of a man in Glasgow who's been unable to take up an offer from an airline because of his status. Andrew Black reports.
I started flying at the age of 15 and worked kind of all the way through my teens to build up and actually gain my private pilot's licence before I could drive.
Anthony, not his real name, spoke to the BBC asking that we protect his identity. He was offered a place on EasyJet's pilot training programme, but he can't take up the position because he's HIV positive.
And obviously he was very upset because, you know, at this point it was quite a definitive no. And it was a dream that I'd had from a very young age. And to be told no, but actually to be told no because of your HIV status was utterly devastating.
Anthony's status means he's unable to get the medical clearance he needs to obtain a commercial pilot's licence. But the organisation HIV Scotland says those rules amount to discrimination.
HIV remains a protected characteristic under the Equalities Act, and we believe that there is no medical evidence to suggest that safety would be compromised.
The Civil Aviation Authority says it's bound by European regulations, but in a statement the UK regulator said we support a rule change in this area where it's safe to do so and will continue to work with the European Aviation Safety Agency and HIV experts to reassess this regulation. The European agency said under EU treaties, member states are responsible for interpreting and implementing EU law in their national legal system. The organisation said it was itself considering reforms, but added a rule change takes time. EasyJet has also supported the call for change. That makes Anthony hopeful for the future, but for now, his dream will have to wait. Andrew Black, reporting Scotland.
It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's top story. Plans for a facility in Glasgow which would allow heroin users to take the drug under supervision have been blocked by the Home Office. And still to come, high hopes as Scotland names one of its strongest ever athletic squads for next year's Commonwealth Games. Do you want to pay more tax? Are you willing to do so? Or do you think more tax should be paid, but not by you? Well, these are no longer just questions for an opinion poll. They're at the heart of the Holyrood budget to be published this Thursday. So what options are there? Well, our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, has been asking some taxing questions.
You think you should be paying more tax?
Certainly not. No. If it went to the right department, the right, spent the right way, I think most people would be willing to spend a wee bit more.
Potentially a little bit.
Lots of us pay income tax. Not everybody understands it. So in Holyrood's Budget Week, A reminder, if you earn less than £11,500 this year, you'll pay no income tax at all. You may pay contributions to national insurance, and that can feel like an income tax. Above that level, you'll pay 20 pence in income tax for every pound that you earn. That's in general, there are allowances. That's up to £43,000. Above that level, for every pound, you'll pay 40 pence in income tax, and that's up to £150,000. If you're lucky enough to earn that, not many people are, you'll pay 45 pence for every additional pound earned.
There was a divergence from Westminster tax last year, using limited powers at Holyrood to charge Scottish higher rate payers £400 more.
For next year, for the first time, nearly all income tax leavers in Scotland are going to be controlled by Derek Mackay, Holyrood's Finance Secretary. One thing he cannot change is the tax-free personal allowance. Westminster's decided that that's going to stay at just short of £12,000. What could he do, though? He could change the rate of tax, the pence in the pound, currently 20 and 40 pence. He could change the point at which you begin to pay the higher rate. That's £43,000. He could bring that down. Or he could add another band, or 2 or 3, as other countries have.
The Scottish Government wants any tax hike to help the economy grow, but higher tax can lower growth. Today we got a forecast for a feeble 1.2% growth next year.
If you look at other countries, they maybe raise more in income tax, but they spend that money wisely on key growth enhancing activities, whether that be research and development, whether it be education, whether that be infrastructure. But some of these benefits are quite hard to quantify. They're not always guaranteed. So just by raising more money, there's no guarantee that you'll get the economic boost that you hope to get.
The view from the street? It's complicated.
I'd be happy to pay a bit more tax if I knew that some of my pay was going to public sector increases, because I don't think the increases have been enough in the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Things like prescription charges and tuition fees have kind of mitigated austerity.
If you tax higher earners more, some of them leave. It's a question of what brings in the most money.
But this is not just about the economy, it's also political. There's quite a strong tide running at Holyrood in favour of using these new powers, at least to show that Scotland can do things its own way. Douglas Fraser, reporting Scotland.
Well, there is a development tonight, with Scottish ministers being warned that high earners could find ways to avoid increases in the top rate of tax north of the border. Let's go to Holyrood and our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian, in any way, does this give us a clue to the government's thinking?
You know, I think it might just, Jackie. I mean, what's happened is, as Douglas mentioned there, Scottish Finance Secretary Derek Mackay looking at options prior to his budget on Thursday. One thing that was pressed upon him was that top rate that Douglas mentioned of 45 pence in the pound paid by those earning over 150,000. It was suggested, not least by Labour and others, that should go up to 50 pence in the pound. Ministers looked at that last year, they've looked at it again, and they've taken advice from the Council of Economic Advisers. The chief economist to the Scottish Government, Gary Gillespie, has said, well, if you do that, there's a serious risk that these people will be able to avoid that by changing perhaps the way their tax is declared, or the nature of their residence, or whatever. In other words, there is a risk you wouldn't bring in the cash that you expect. But Mr Gillespie also says that if it doesn't go up by 5 pence, if it goes up by a smaller amount, who knows, perhaps 1 or 2%, then that lessens that risk. Now, to stress, this is detached, neutral advice given by a very senior civil servant to ministers. But do I believe it is an indication of the way ministerial minds might be turning? You bet I do.
We'll find out on Thursday. Brian, thank you. Engineers are now assessing a crack in the Forties pipeline after it was successfully shut down overnight. It's estimated the shutdown will cost the industry around £20 million a day in lost revenue. Ineos, which owns the pipeline, says it expects the fix will take several weeks. Our energy correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
It's normally buried, but today this small section of the Forties pipeline is opened up. It carries crude oil from the North Sea to land at Cruden Bay in Aberdeenshire and then on to Grangemouth for processing. Save for the odd warning sign from its previous owner, BP, few people would normally notice that it was there. But it's a crucial piece of infrastructure for the oil and gas industry. More than 80 platforms have had to halt production. The pipe's owners say they've been trying to find the fault for some time.
We send down equipment which inspects the pipeline from the inside, and that can tell us if there's any issue. We ran that equipment and it found a small issue here, And we've gone in and then excavated the site to take a closer look at the pipe, and that's when we found the small crack.
The shutdown is badly timed. An explosion and fire at the Baumgarten natural gas hub in Austria has affected the flow of Russian gas into Europe.
Mr. Paul Wheelhouse.
But Scotland's Energy Minister says there are no threats to supplies.
There are no plans to shut down Grangemouth refinery and no impacts are anticipated for fuel and gas supplies. There are sufficient stocks of crude oil to continue operations in the refinery for more than a week, and Petronas are also developing contingency plans to import alternative supplies of crude oil should this become necessary to ensure continued operation.
The damage to the Forties pipeline seems to have been caused by a rock putting pressure on the pipe. It could be out for some time. This is a remote location with just a handful of houses nearby. Some of those people have moved out temporarily, but that's where the bulk of the focus is now concentrating. Analysts say a prolonged shutdown and continued cold weather are likely to push up wholesale prices. But INEOS says it hopes to have the pipeline running again within weeks. Kevin Keane reporting, Scotland, Netherley.
Now, Hampden is, of course, the national football stadium, but a survey of fans suggests 4 out of 5 of them want that changed. The SFA is currently considering whether to renew its lease, which expires in 2020. It could mean Scotland games and cup finals moving to other locations. Alistair Lamont can tell us more.
At the Scottish Football Museum, a reminder of the history of Hampden.
At Hampden Park, Glasgow, the turnstiles click merrily to the music of thousands of bobbies. It's Scotland against England at soccer.
And nostalgia is certainly a factor for at least some supporters of the National Stadium.
Obviously I've had some great memories there, and it's a special place for me, and I'm a big fan of Hampden. It generates a great atmosphere when it's full, and I can understand for some games, you know, like the friendlies, move it away to Easter Road, Tynecastle, Pittodrie, places like that, when it's a lower crowd. But for me, certainly Hampden should be used as a national stadium.
But such romanticism doesn't appear to be a concern for the nearly 3,000 fans who've responded to an online survey on Hampden's future. In fact, only 15% of those surveys said they wanted Hampden in its current state to stay as the host of national team games and Scottish Cup finals. 26% say they'd like to see a new, redeveloped Hampden built here for the benefit of the fan experience. But 25% said they'd like to do away with Hampden altogether and take those keynote games around the country to club grounds such as Celtic Park and Ibrox. But the biggest chunk of all, 34%, said they want the National Stadium to move from west to east to Edinburgh and Murrayfield Stadium, the home of Scottish rugby. But are those anonymous online views a reflection of how match-going fans feel?
I've never liked Hampden, never.
My preference would be Murrayfield, Ibrox and Parkhead.
Murrayfield would be the best stadium for Scottish internationals.
Hampden. There's no point in having it anywhere else.
The momentous decision over Hampden's future is expected sometime in the new year. Alistair Lamont reporting, Scotland.
The performance director of Scottish Athletics says the squad heading for the Australian Gold Coast is more like an Olympic team than a Commonwealth one. Such is their strength that ambitions are high for their best games in decades, as Rona McLeod reports.
Yeah, chill out, lads, calm down.
Temperatures were well below zero, but Scotland's selection of Olympians, Paralympians and World Championship athletes were happy to brave the cold and fly the flag. Gold Coast selection for Team Scotland is an achievement indeed in the current climate of athletic success.
The names here are well known, you know, they're established athletes, and you feed off that. When you're at a games and you see other athletes, that are part of your team winning medals, it just makes you want to win them as well, and it has this real kind of domino effect. And having a team where we've got a potential of so many medals, I think it's going to have a real big influence on the whole team.
We've had 16 athletes to the Olympic Games, and they're similar to the World Championships this year in London, and it looks like that, more or less, that whole contingent have bound together as a Scottish identity, and they're all going to be in the Gold Coast together. So I'm absolutely delighted that effectively what could be an Olympic team is heading to the Gold Coast as part of a Scotland team.
Andrew Butchart, what a race he's having.
The last time the Games were in Australia, Scotland won 2 medals in athletics. 4 years later in Delhi, it was the same, a silver and bronze medal. But in 2014, Scottish athletics fared better. 1 gold, 2 silver and a bronze.
We've set ourselves a target of 4 or more medals, and that's up on what we've won in the last few Commonwealth Games. So we've got a good crop of athletes that are looking to deliver that, and that's what we're looking for them to do.
And Ailey Child of Scotland takes the silver.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go there and win a gold. I think, you know, that would just be the kind of icing on the cake for me.
Steph Twell of Scotland is in third with a bronze medal.
It's every athlete's dream to get a gold medal, but if I can bring a bit of bling back, I would be super happy. So yeah, I've got the bronze, and one step ahead, you know, a silver or gold will be amazing.
So dreams of gold for the Gold Coast. Scottish athletes working hard to make them come true. Rona McLeod, reporting Scotland.
Well, it looked like a hard frost in Stirling today. Let's get the forecast from Causer.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening. Indeed, yes, a very cold night so far already, and we're quite a wet one as well across central and western parts, with showers of rain, sleet and snow. We have this weather system bringing that rain spreading eastwards. There'll be a drier interlude before the next band of showers spread in from the west, and again, these could fall as snow over the hills. So our attention turns to the risk of icy stretches tonight. The Met Office have issued this yellow be aware weather warning for most of Scotland, bar the Hebrides and the far west coast. And it's these showers that are falling on frozen ground that bring the risk of icy stretches on untreated roads and surfaces. But even where we have some salt, they could be washed away by some of these showers by the second band of rain that arrives later in the night. So there's that rain of band clearing, some clear spells turning quite chilly for parts of Aberdeenshire and Angus especially, and then this next band of rain by morning falling as snow over the hills. And temperatures, well, less cold than it has been in previous nights. Temperatures in towns and cities above freezing, but maybe down to -3 or -4 Celsius for some rural areas in the northeast. So tomorrow starts with those showers. Again, some of them heavy at times and prolonged across central, southwestern parts of the country. By the afternoon, a mix of some sunny spells in between and quite breezy for western coastal areas. So if you're heading out around 3 o'clock, we can see those showers across the Northern Isles, across the North Highland, into the northwest, where they'll be wintry. The best chance of any sunshine, parts of Aberdeenshire and the Murray Coast area, but cold in the sun. Across the west here into the southwest, those showers with us still, but mainly as rain for more coastal areas, and temperatures around 7 Celsius for the Solway coast. For the evening too, some further showers, prolonged for a time, and then we'll see clearer spells further towards the east. And then looking ahead, well, for Thursday morning, we're seeing this area of low pressure coming in from the Atlantic. Now, there is some uncertainty to the detail of this, but there is the potential of some snowfall for the morning commute across parts of the central belt and across the south, and there may be some warnings issued for this. The best chance of any drier weather across the north. And that's your forecast.
Thank you, Causer. Now a reminder of tonight's main news. Rising food costs, bigger electricity bills and higher airfares have all helped push inflation to its highest level for almost 6 years. The Consumer Price Index, the measure the government uses, hit 3.1% last month. And that's Reporting Scotland. We're back with our main roundup at 10:25. Until then, from all the team, good evening.